Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, dear brothers and sisters from all around the world, with a new episode of Signs of Prophethood with your host, Omar Khalid. Last time we talked about the status of women in Islam and comparing this with the pre-Islamic era, and also comparing this with what we hear from the calls of some people to liberate women and so on. And because the time was limited, so we couldn't cover so many points, so we would like to continue. But before this, we would like to welcome Sheikh Ibrahim Zidane. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum assalam.
We're happy to have you again, Sheikh Ibrahim, and we would like to continue this very nice and very beautiful topic. And we talked about the last time, like mothers and their status in Islam. We want to talk about daughters right now, because pre-Islamic era, we know that daughters, they were buried alive because they were considered to be a source of disgrace, and some of the disbelievers, they consider them also sometimes maybe a source of, also they have lots of babies or so on. They don't want to be in poverty. So how did Islam deal with the status of daughters?
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam wa rasulullah wa ba'd. As we heard that the deen of Islam is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of all beings, the creator of men and women. So the rulings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the perfect rulings, and that's one of the miraculous things about the deen of Islam, not just in one aspect, in every aspect. Every ruling in the deen of Islam is miraculous because it's the most perfect, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we said, when people turn away from the light of the revelation from Allah, you find all these types of evil things. And it's present till today. One of the things that made very clear in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it a major sin, one of the worst sins ever, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ مِنْ إِمْلَاقٍ نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. Do not kill your daughters or your children or your infants, whatever, out of the fear of poverty. Sometimes they would do that out of the fear of being disgraced or whatever. So if it's out of fear of poverty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for you and provide for them. In other verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for them and provide for you. Because people, they sometimes fear for their own selves. If they have children and so on, this would affect their financial being. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would assure them, you will be provided for, don't worry, and they come first. And some people, they fear for their own children that will not be able to provide for them in the proper way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also give them this comfort that it's not you that provides. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. So that's why these calls of limiting the birth to the Muslims or to the human beings in general, it's part of this mischief and part of this evil that people think that they have means in their own hands, meaning that they're the ones that are providers. And basically, this is a creation of Allah. And people should never have this in their minds, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. And we are nothing but means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses us. So before the Prophet ﷺ, it would happen, and they would have children and they would bury them alive. So they would kill them, so that they would protect themselves. This is how they thought. From
especially
poverty.
Daughters.
Especially daughters, because usually the boys or the males, they grow up and to be source of income for the family and so on. So this is something that was widespread among the Arabs before the Prophet ﷺ, and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, and it was erased completely.
SubhanAllah. So we can say by comparison that nowadays we have one sort of abortion.
Definitely, there's no doubt. An abortion, also, when we ask question, what's the difference between abortion and what used to be happening in the ignorant days of Jahili? It's the same thing. A fetus is a life, whether it's in the womb of the mother or outside. What's the difference? It's a life. And that's when people go pro-life or pro-choice. This is part of the chaos that human beings fall in when they're away from the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who's the one that created this life? It's not the human being, it's not our choice. If a person is a carrier of something, he does not really the creator of it. The creator is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who's the one that brought the life to this embryo, to this child, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who whatsoever on the face of earth has the right to take this life away? This is as killing someone that is 20 years old or 40 years old, again, after the life has been blown into this new creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And it's also related, Sheikh Ibrahim, to what you alluded to last time, the dissolution and disintegration of families in the West, and what they want the Muslim world to be. And most of the cases in abortion, it's made in outside of wedlock, so the illegitimate.
Right. And this is what actually sometimes, even in the Muslim world, when these types of things happens as a result of haram. And it shows that when a person commits a sin, one of the evil outcome of the sin is another sin. So, and that's what the steps of shaitan is. The first sin, which is committing zina or adultery or fornication, it's a major sin. But what worse than this is killing a life. So a person is going from a lesser sin to a worse sin. So end up being a killer basically. And that's why it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected us from this by these types of rulings to make it very clear. And not just that, but even the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned in the hadith that he even have more love to have daughters than sons when it comes to the offspring. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that shows that whoever have 3 daughters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test the person with, and he take care of them, not just to have them, but to raise them properly and to take care of them. And some of the narrations, he did not humiliate them. That's why in Islam, the upbringing of the girl is different than the upbringing of the boy. Justice has to be there, and a parent should not treat the girl better in a way that become unjust to the boys or vice versa. But the treatment is different because they are going to grow up to, there is some physical difference, and there are physical different roles in life. So that's why it's extremely softness and goodness to the girls more than the boys. And this is something that has to be observed even the upbringing. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned this, and he said that the reward of such a thing is that there will be a shield for the person from the hellfire. So when a woman, she asked, what if it's 2? And the Prophet ﷺ, yes. And they would said, even if she was asked to, if 1, he would say yes. It means the reward of is a great reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the total opposite of disgrace and poverty, that the person would receive the highest levels as a result of having children, specifically to have daughters.
SubhanAllah. So we would like to talk about specifically how did the Prophet deal with his daughters?
This is definitely, this needs series actually. If we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ and how he treated his daughters and the upbringing of his daughters, and they're all from Khadija radiallahu anha. And even like Zainab radiallahu anha, when she died during his lifetime ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ took care of that. And of course Fatima radiallahu anha is one of the most famous ones, closest to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ would be extremely kind to her, and when she would enter to the Prophet ﷺ, he would stand up and he would embrace her and so on. And he would go ﷺ to even deal sometimes with not disputes, but what normally happens in any household. And that's also a lesson for us, that in the household of Ali radiallahu anhu and Fatima radiallahu anha, sometimes there used to be some issues. And the Prophet ﷺ, being the father of Fatima radiallahu anha, he would not interfere as someone that is an opponent to Ali radiallahu anhu, but someone that with so much kindness and mercy. And there's a famous hadith in this, it's a beautiful one, how the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to their place and he did not find Ali radiallahu anhu, and as if he went for a reason, and when she asked about Fatima, he asked Fatima radiallahu anha, his daughter, where is your cousin? And he did not say her husband, because he's reminding her of there is also a relationship there. And she said that there was something between me and him, meaning a dispute or some small thing like this, and he left and he went to the masjid, which as the ulama, they say how even the husband, when there's something, he went to the masjid, he did not go to a cafe or something like this. And the Prophet ﷺ went to him, and he is the father-in-law. He went to him in the masjid, and he found him laying down, sleeping in the masjid, taking the afternoon nap, with dust on him. And the Prophet ﷺ kept cleaning the dust from his son-in-law, and saying, Qum Aba Turab, Qum Aba Turab, get up, O the father of dust. And this used to stay with Ali radiallahu anhu, that he remembered this so much till later in life, after Fatima radiallahu anha died, after the Prophet ﷺ died. And he used to love so much this kunya, or this nickname that the Prophet ﷺ called him, Aba Turab. Things like this within the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved this for us to see these types of relationships in an environment where there's no such a thing, an environment where they used to call someone that is a man a tough, the toughness and the nobility of a man, that he doesn't show mercy and kindness to his children. It's against being a man, things like this. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he asked one of the people, when he saw the Prophet ﷺ kissing Al-Hasan or Al-Husayn, and he told him, I have 10 kids. This man said to the Prophet ﷺ, I never kissed one of them. So the Prophet ﷺ said, what do I do if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away the mercy from your heart. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this issue of mercy. So to have mercy towards one's children, this is instinct. Right? Everybody has mercy towards their children. But when this is also an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means this is a religious duty to show this mercy and to have this kindness and to have the upbringing in the proper way. And especially for the daughters. And that's why for us as Muslims, again, as we said, a daughter is different than a boy. And the girl is in upbringing her with softness, with kindness, with sometimes you might be a little bit tough on the boy because of what he is supposed to face in life, physical, being that, for example, he would have some challenges physically. So that's why he's raised in such a way that he has to endure these types of things. But for a woman, it's different. And that's why the treatment is a very kind one, is a very decent one, and to be extremely kind with them.
SubhanAllah. Very beautiful, Sheikh Ibrahim. After the break, we would like to talk about the financial independence of women and comparing this before Islam and nowadays, inshallah. So, dear brothers and sisters, we are going to meet again after the break. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters. We were talking with Sheikh Ibrahim about the financial independence of women. We would like to compare this before the revelation came to the Prophet. How did the women, did they have any right to own any property or money?
For the most part, women were treated as a commodity, as someone that is completely controlled. Some women, yes, in times of Jahiliyyah, they used to have some status and some power. Like Khadija, the wife of the Prophet, she used to have her money with trade and so on. But for the most part, this was not the case. And this became a religion, became established with legislation and rulings and so on, that Muslim women, they have their own status, independent financially. And even when it comes to marriages, she has a say. And there's many hadith about this. And it does not take away from the shyness and the goodness that a wife would have or the woman would have. There's actually, since even though it's financial, but it shows also the independence. But I want to mention this narration, it's in Sunan Nisa and others, where a woman, she came to the Prophet ﷺ saying that her father, he got her married against her will, لِيَرْفَعْ عَنْهُ خَسِيسَتَهُ, so that the marriage was for a reason for him to have some honor. To get some honor by marrying that specific individual or so. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered for the man to come, the father, and فَجَعَ الْأَمْرُ إِلَيْهَا. Prophet ﷺ made her affairs to her. That means she now has the authority whether to keep the marriage or to ask for divorce or to break the marriage. She has the right. He gave this authority to her. And then she said no, she wants to continue the marriage, but she wanted to see أَعْلَمُ النِّسَاءِ الْأَمْرُ إِلَيْهِنَّ أو كما قال. That means I want to know that are women basically in Islam, do they have this, or it's nothing of the right whatsoever is to be observed. So for women to see that. So, and she continued with the marriage. But this is a very important one. And therefore also financially, she has the right to have her money. Women are ordered in Islam to give charity. And that's a good thing actually for them to have money and so on. And even from the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, where they used to sow things and that she would sell it and she would get money and she would give charity. So the earning part of this is absolutely fine. But this does not have to be necessarily that she goes out to work. This going out to work in systems, in companies and so on, so this is a totally different thing.
What are the rules of getting out?
The rulings here is that, and this is also one of the miraculous things about the deen of Islam that fits the goals of the deen, that the provider is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The provider of the household is the man. 100% financial responsibility for the household is upon the man. The woman has no financial responsibilities, obligations, no obligations whatsoever. If out of her goodwill she has money she wants to give, it's considered to be a charity. And she would get a great deed if she does this. And therefore, the man is the one that provides, and that's why he's the one that goes to physically outside and work and so on and so forth. Unless there is an exception, and the exceptions are not to be given the rulings of the norm. So this is an exception. So the woman, either she's a mother or a daughter or a sister and so on, that means there's a man with goodness and honor and dignity because it's her right, is to support her and to provide her perfectly. If she doesn't have this, then Baytul Mal, the money comes from the Muslim government and so on, and to support her perfectly. Say, for example, there's no means like this, then she can have, means for her to go outside. But when it comes to earning, it doesn't, she can do this even in the comfort of her home. There's no harm in this, but the rights of the husband and the household comes first, of course. And that's by the permission of her husband, because of the overall goals of the family. It's not about the greed that we as human beings we have. We'd find nowadays, when people are in a family, many cases it's all about greed. The husband is going after his own personal benefit, and the same thing for the wife, and the children are lost in between. So, but when it comes to living in a family, living in a country, you see even sometimes road, that for the benefit of the people that the road needs to be expanded, what do they do to the houses and the things on both sides? They would even demolish this, and people don't have a choice. They will they will be given the recompense of this and so on, but there's no choice for them. Nobody would say, this is my house, you cannot do anything about it. Because of the overall benefit, sometimes people, they have to sacrifice. And it's a good cause, definitely, without being treated with injustice whatsoever. So the same thing, people chose to be husband or wife, they have to have some sacrifice for the sake of the family, for the sake of the children and so on. But to live in this greed, then a person has to have his career and all of this, and then abusing the basic rights of a child to be raised in a healthy environment where there's a father and a mother taking care of the children and so on. So it's not about haram or halal only. There's some things, of course, is not permissible, going in and out and mixing and free mixing and all of this. That now we're talking about, this is the norm. And this is not something that's supposed to be the norm, this is supposed to be the exception. But earning by itself is not an issue. It's the issue of involving haram in this and abusing the rights of a family. This is a very serious matter.
And does this answer the point of inheritance? Because some people, they ask about that. And they ask it in this form. Why do women take half of what men take? So is this an answer? Because women, as a daughter, as a mother, as a sister, as a wife, they are you're responsible for them. The males are responsible for them. They're not responsible for their financial,
That's one of the wisdom, yes, because there's no case whatsoever where a woman, especially when it's inheritance, that means there's a family. There's a father, there's a husband, there's this and that. That means these men are responsible 100% for the honor and dignity financially for the women. So to be given with shares of inheritance, this is something that she would, if you compare between both, if a man takes more than her, he will end up spending on her and she keeps it in her pocket, basically. She does not have any obligations to spend compared to the man that has so many obligations on him. So he won't take the money for his own personal glory. He's more likely that he would spend it on his household or responsibilities in his life. But more than this is, it's not about half, it's not half. It's specific rulings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. It's only in the case, or one of the cases, when there's sons and daughters, the sons, they take double the share of what the daughters get, and if they are on the same level. But there's the mother, for example, the mother sometimes she gets 1/3, sometimes she gets 1/6, so and the grandmother, she gets 1/6. So it's not usually the daughter. Sometimes a daughter, if she's the only daughter, she gets 1/2 of the inheritance. So it's the justice from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not from human being made laws that is usually very abusive, and people would regret it seriously in this life and in hereafter if they don't follow the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So that means that some countries, that they made a rule that men and women, they can take equal share in inheritance. This is totally against.
This is evil. This is far worse than just a major sin. This is an act of kufr. This is an act of disbelief, to change in the rulings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is no doubt. This is consensus among the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to the laws of inheritance. So someone to erase the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like this is such an evil act.
SubhanAllah. We want to talk, Shaykh, about the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with his wives. What was his day with his wives inside his house?
The day of the Prophet ﷺ was explained by Aisha radiallahu anha and others, where he كان يكون في مهنة أهله. Prophet ﷺ, he would be in the affairs of his family, doing the work, the household with his family. And the mihna, the word mihna, is something that do with as if it's a job. That means, and in other narrations, that he would fix his shoes, that he would help with the household work and so on and so forth. But once the time for the salah comes, the Prophet ﷺ go to the salah. And the Prophet ﷺ, if a person wants to see an individual and to test the manners of an individual, he should not test him when he's at work or in the public area, or like politics and so on and so forth. But rather, you need to go to the most private of his life and to see how he's conducting his life. Many people get deceived by even sometimes people to be known as scholars even, or people of religion and so on. But then they get shocked when they get to know that their personal life is so damaged and disturbing. And as if a person is living double life or triple life, or whatever there is. The Prophet ﷺ, the amazing life of the Prophet ﷺ, that everything is exposed. And that's one of the wisdom that some of the ulama mentioned, that the Prophet ﷺ had 9 wives, not just one, but 9 households and 9 wives.
So that proves if somebody was claiming to be a prophet, he wouldn't have this risk of
right, and to see his manners with his wives, and what did they say about him, and that the manners of the Prophet ﷺ with the strangers and with the people, and being in charge of the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, and being a husband and being a father and so on, how his manners in the household, most people would fail in this. And the Prophet ﷺ was perfect in both, no faults in both, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him from major and minor sins in both lives. Being a husband in the most, just him and his wife and nobody else is seeing them, he used to be the perfect person, والسلام, and also with the masses of the people. And that's why he said, والسلام, which is a miraculous hadith also, for us, if a person is sincere that wants to be among the best of those who have manners, we all want to be like this. But then how to do and how to go about by being the best people in manners? He said, والسلام, خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. The best among you are the best towards his family, and I'm the best towards my family. So this statement is such a very powerful statement. Who would ever say about himself with all kinds of humbleness that he is the best to his family, and his life is exposed والسلام, in such a way that it's saved for us of what happened even in his households and so on, that for people to see that he was the best to his family. And that's the best of all individuals when a person is like this. So if a person wants to be perfect and good with manners, then he should fix that with his wife, with his children, with his family.
Very beautiful, Sheikh Ibrahim. And even when we covered so many beautiful points, we couldn't cover everything. Thank you so much, Sheikh Ibrahim. And we hope that you, brothers and sisters, enjoyed this beautiful episode. Until next time, stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.